Hey Greg, how are you?
Hey Nick, I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
Hi Juliana, I'm well, thank you. And you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Juliana, I don't know if you even told me. How did you meet Greg or how did you come in contact with Greg?
Well, good things happen. I we connected through Instagram
Okay.
somehow, and I was looking into his work, and I thought this is great. This is really interesting. I want to ask him if he'll be in the podcast, and we started talking. We had a phone call to get to know each other more, and he was up for doing this. Obviously, unique were too, and you were informed about that. And then we just set out a time, and I have been learning about his work since then. And here we are. That's how.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, like I knew when you brought Greg up, I knew of him. Like I knew of him
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like I've seen his plates at Blue Hill and things. So it's super cool what you're doing, and I'm always fascinated by Blue Hill and what the things going on there, and just this ecosystem of people connected to it in whatever way, because it's such a fascinating place. And as I was just telling you, like I'm there guaranteed every spring to buy plants because it's like they have they're a great source of plants like from their greenhouses that and they sell them to the community, and it's great. And I'm not that far. I'm like a half hour away, and yeah, so I love Blue Hill, and
Yeah, it's beautiful up there.
yeah,
Yeah, the farm is gorgeous. Stone Barns is just a very beautiful place to go. And when we hang up here, I'm headed up there actually from
okay,
Philadelphia.
Oh,
So
cool.
it's a couple hour drive for me through New Jersey. But then it opens up when you get to Tarrytown and view of the Hudson River. It's bucolic up there.
so you're outside of Philly or like in Philly? Okay.
No, I'm just outside of Philadelphia. I teach at a university, a small liberal arts college just north of the city, and live in that same town. It's a first ring suburb of Philadelphia,
Okay.
so the train brings us in 20 minutes, and
Okay.
I don't know if you know Philadelphia, but it's a great art town, and it's really a wonderful food town too. Um,
Hmm.
and we might get into it, but because of this relationship I've had with Dan Barber, I've gotten to know some Philadelphia chefs who were up at Blue Hill during the pandemic, and through them, I've been here for 20 something years and really didn't know the food scene very well. But now through the chefs down here, I've gotten to know the dynamic food scene here in Philadelphia, and it's really wonderful.
Yeah, it's a cool.
Yeah.
I've been there just a few times, but it's a cool place. It's a cool place. Like there's so many just interesting things, and I think you don't have the pressure as much as New York, like New York City.
Hmm.
Like rents aren't quite as much. You can be a little more creative. You don't have to be full every single day. Well, you probably still do, but I don't know. It's just New York's so hard right now. I feel like Philly's a
Yeah.
good alternative, and it's so
There's
close.
pressure.
Hard meaning what, to have a restaurant?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's
Uh-huh.
just prices of everything are so high. Rent is so like insanely high. I mean, maybe things will change now that, suddenly we've had this burst of awareness with Mondani just being elected and just
Hmm.
the issues of affordability, but yeah, it's been so hard for restaurants.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know much about like the restaurant scene because I come to this collaboration from the art world, and the ceramics world, and really, with a few exceptions, I've only worked with Dan on this project. So the rest of what you're, I'm sure, very much involved in is
Yeah.
just tangential for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
But
I
to
think
give
it
people some context, maybe, Greg. So because yeah, you come from the art world, you have a background in geology, and then you have a master of fine arts, and you're the director of ceramics of this university. So yeah, maybe let's start by that, like that connection between. the geology, and then Dan Barber and everything in
Sure.
between.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so my undergraduate degree is in upstate New York, actually, in geosciences. And really, it's been my everlasting passion.
Okay.
Intellectually, it's still my greatest curiosity is geology and the geosciences. And I think, we probably will talk about it during our discussion, but it emerges in my work over and over and over again. And I was very familiar with the Hudson Valley growing up in northern New Jersey, and spending time up there with family, the geology of upstate New York, geomorphology of upstate New York. Um, but when I was in college is when I took my first ceramics course. And as many students in ceramics in college do, they were introduced to the field through pottery. And that was my introduction as well. Um, and at Skidmore, it was Skidmore College. The quad was the perfect metaphor for the connection between the sciences and the arts, because there were these pathways that connected both buildings. They were just across this little grassy quad, and so I spend my time going back and forth between pottery classes and geology classes, and the connections are abundant. I think most people can see the
Yeah.
connections, starting with stone and the soil and clay, obviously. Um, so they're there. Those connections are both physical and intellectual. And um, after after college, I spent a few years just making art, and then ended up in graduate school for a master's degree in ceramic art. So that transition away from geology as a field as like a profession into the arts happened. And then after graduate school, um, as also often happens, I turned away from pottery and towards sculpture. And for
Okay.
the first 10 years of my career, I was making sculpture and hadn't made pottery. I mean, I would teach pottery, so I would do it as an instructor, but I wouldn't
Hmm.
make it professionally as my work. Um, until in 2009, there was an exhibition in Greenwich, New York, Greenwich House Pottery in New York. And the curator asked me to be a part of it. It was a show called Form Follows Food. And it was the first time since I was an undergraduate, 15 years past, that I approached pottery making again. And it was really a critical moment for me, because the idea of the exhibition was to make functional pottery work, derived from or inspired by very specific food. And for that, I also have a garden, and for years I had been trying to compress the space between my garden, my studio, and my kitchen.
Hmm.
They're three distinct spaces, but the approach to all three, at least from my experience, was very similar. And so I was just trying to shrink that kind of like um, uh, not necessarily physical, but that kind of
Hmm.
metaphorical space between
Yeah.
those trees. And this show was the trigger that made it happen. Um, and then from there, I made a mixture of sculpture and pottery that really had food as its focus, until I read Dan's book, The Third Plate, in 2014. And then it was actually concurrent. I read the book while I had an exhibition up here in Philadelphia where I was partnering with a chef. So the exhibition was in the gallery, and we did a performance in the gallery where he made a meal and used all the work that I had made as part of the exhibition. And we shot just the tabletop, this giant
Hmm.
rectangular table, from the ceiling of the gallery. And the meal, which was about a 3 hour experience, was projected into the adjacent gallery on the wall, like it was a painting, but it was sort of moving slowly. Um, and then that same summer, I read The Third Plate, and I remember being interviewed for the exhibition, and the interviewer asked me if there was a chef I could work with next, who would it be? And obviously, this was fresh on my mind, and I had just like every page was dog-eared. There was a post-it nearly in every chapter. I've since given away my original book. I have no idea where it went, so all my notes are gone. But uh, I I said, Dan, I'd like to work with Dan. And so um, that next spring, I wrote to him and he wrote me back, and then we started working together. And it's been 10 years of.
What did you write him? Just out of curiosity.
I described the project I was
Yeah.
working on in the gallery, right?
Hmm.
And I approach a lot of my work doesn't look like pottery, even though it's used as such.
Hmm.
And so I approach the work more, I think, as a sculptor with the then specific and peculiar demand that these sculptures need to function.
Uh-huh.
I saw so many similarities between his approach
Hmm.
as a chef or as a cook in the kitchen and my approach as an artist in the studio. And I described some of those, and I think it resonated. So we hit it off.
Just what were those similarities? Like kinds of materials being used, or
Yeah, I think
okay, yeah.
a good example. There's so many, and but maybe one that I think might be tangible for most is the relationship. Like if you look at flour in a
Hmm.
bakery, because there's a whole section in Dan's book about flour,
Hmm.
about coming into the bakery and seeing the denuded white
Yeah.
flour that had no nutrition and was lifeless. Well, in the ceramic studio, it's very similar. You can make clay by opening a bag
Hmm.
of highly processed clay that is very regular, right? It's air
Yeah.
floated, every
Yeah.
particle
Yeah.
is the same,
Yeah.
but it kind of leaves you wanting more in terms of its materiality. And so flour and clay, even the process of mixing the two, like
Hmm.
you can think about you have flour and you add water to animate it, right?
Hmm.
To mix it and animate it.
Yeah.
Well, the same with clay. You have
Yeah.
powder, you add
Yeah.
water to animate it. And then you give it time to dry and to rest. Ceramics has
Mm.
to dry
Yeah.
slowly so it doesn't crack.
Yeah.
Bread has to dry or age or
Hmm.
have time so it can leaven, or is that a word, leaven?
Yeah. Yeah. 11. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then the real transformative element for both is fire or heat,
Yeah.
right? Clay becomes ceramic through the application of heat in a kiln. Dough becomes bread through the application of heat in an oven. And so that's a real kind of, I think, illustrative example of how the kitchen and the studio are very similar, ceramics and
Hmm.
cooking. And the examples just kept unfolding. And as I
Yeah.
was reading the third plate, I would do these things where I would cross out the word cook or chef and write
Mm.
artist, and the sentence worked.
Yeah.
And so it just made sense that we should work together.
Huh.
Yeah.
And you actually have this, I guess, is the summary of all these. Instead of calling it farm to table, you included the word kiln, which is like that in between state of cooking or baking or through fire transforming whatever is coming from the earth, right? Which is very interesting because it includes your work, but it also addresses the function of fire and baking and cooking and right.
Right, right. Heat as a metamorphosis, right? As
Yeah,
the
yeah.
agent of metamorphosis. And it takes what could be very kind of flat ingredients. So ingredients in the kitchen equals materials in the studio, right? That's
Hmm.
the parallel
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And it transforms them into something more meaningful, and hopefully it becomes sustenance. You know, the goal is that in the kitchen it's sustenance, that's physical sustenance through food. In art, it's probably a little more of an emotional or cognitive or intellectual sustenance through aesthetics. And
Mm.
with pottery, it's not simply aesthetics, it's functionality as well.
That's another great summary because I was going to ask you how people take this, how people absorb this and understand why this might make a difference in the experience. And you just mentioned two things: the aesthetics of it and its sustenance through that, but also it's functional and it also uses, which is another connection with Dan Barber, the whole animal, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
leftovers of the animal, even after, not only edible, but also usable to sustain that food and it's really it's all connected. So I don't know if you can tell us more about that, like how the reactions of people, but also why this makes a difference in terms of the food world, the art world, the climate crisis world, all
Hmm.
of it.
Well, I think it's definitely full circle, and I think my training as a geologist, what it does is it kind of expands and shrinks those circles to different scales, right? So the work has as much to do with time as it has to do with material. In that, there's a cycle on the farm that is usually a year of planting cycle,
Hmm.
growing and harvesting, or shorter, like a few months for planting and harvesting.
Yeah.
And then you can then think of that time scale as an annual time scale that repeats and repeats and repeats. And one of the things that has given me perspective on this is that this has been a long collaborative relationship where over a decade so far I've been able to see these cycles emerge. And so there's there's kind of the growing season time scale, there's the annual time scale. Now it's the decade of work, and one of the pieces that I hope we'll talk about is this um, capturing the surface of the farm over a decade through all the seasons, which is maybe a piece. It's so new that it's not been out there yet,
Yeah.
that we could talk about, um, and the cyclical nature of it all. So really, I think where my work and Dan's work uh, um, meet is at the surface of the soil, and how that plane, that surface, is where matter transmutates. Right? It. If you even go back geologically to the last glaciation and the deposition of the soil that's now at Stone Barns in the Hudson Valley, 15,000 years ago. That soil then, or I should say that rock there that's deposited on the farm, you walk around the farm, you see these rocks all over. And it's been cultivated, so they've been moved, but
Hmm.
those are depositions from the last glaciation, and those rocks over millions of years break down into soil. And that soil then, so we're talking about something that's geological, that soil uh, at the surface, this very dynamic space, the surface of the farm, roots enzymes break down the soil into nutrients for plants, let's say grass.
Hmm.
So we have the transmutation of matter from rock to biology, something
Yeah.
geological to biological. And then the grass gets eaten. It goes from plant to animal. And the cow digests the grass. And I like to describe it as like, have you ever read the Magic School Bus?
Hmm.
I used to read that to my kids all the time, and it's like if you hop on the Magic School Bus on a calcium particle or a phosphorus, calcium
Yeah.
and phosphorus, and then it goes from rock to soil, from soil through the roots to grass, from the grass to the cow, deposited into the bone, becomes bone material. Now, what was a rock is now walking
Mm.
around on the farm,
Hmm.
and then we eat that cow, and then the leftovers are the bones. And those bones, they used to be rock. If we're still on that
Hmm.
calcium or phosphorus atom, uh, become part of us, right, in the meat. But then the bone left over, what do we do with it? Does it go back to the soil? But in my case, it becomes part of not the food that we're eating, but the dishes that we're eating the food off of,
Hmm.
because I take
Yeah.
those bones and turn them into bone china, and then they return back to the kitchen and to the restaurant to serve that very food that was once the same material. And then, if we can expand that geologic time millions of years ahead, it'll just become soil again,
Yeah.
and maybe metamorphose into rocks again. And so it's really just that
Yeah.
scale that we choose to view this at. Those
Hmm.
cycles continue. And in terms of ecological sense, um, there's this just wonderful book written by a geologist in Wisconsin called Timefulness. And it's a geological perspective on time. and then our relationship as humans to our environment, ecology, and our role and responsibility in there. Um, and, I think the work, it, eating is such a fleeting moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, you're at the table and you take a bite, and that is now, that food that was not a part of you is now a part of you. And it's almost instantaneous. Whereas the, the kind of thinking about this cycle geologically, and how the work that I make is a part of it is just a much longer time
Yeah,
scale.
yeah,
But
yeah. No, but
they're all the same. I'm sorry, go
it's
ahead.
it's fascinating to, it's like
Yeah.
in the restaurant world and culinary world, we want to think of food that's alive, coming from soil that's alive, and otherwise it's just like some weird chemicals put together and glued together and packaged, and just this dead shit that doesn't give us any nutrition. But it's like so little do people think about what the actual plate and like other
Mm.
parts of the restaurant. Like it's weird that that's like missing from the conversation sometimes. That like why shouldn't the plate be alive too?
Mm. Oh, I love
Like
that. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, but
when you say,
that's what I feel like when I hear you talk about it. It's like these rocks, these minerals and everything. They're alive. They're part of this earth too. They're moving and transforming, and they're giving the plants life. So why shouldn't
Mhm.
they be the foundation of what the food's sitting on? It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah, no, I
fascinating.
agree. And I think it's really I think we tend to think of things that are rocks, geological chemicals and rocks, as over here in one category, and
Yeah,
there's a divide, this gap, this vacuum between that and things that are living. But if you look closely enough, it's all the same stuff,
yeah,
and that stuff goes back and forth.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's the biogeochemical cycle is really a cycle. Things become biology and geology and back and forth, and it's very cyclical. So when you come, if you eat at Blue Hill Stone Barns, the place setting really is the title of the piece. It's a three object piece. The
hmm,
place setting that's there, and I like to think of it as place dash setting. So it's a place setting, but it is also setting place.
yeah,
And that's very important because it emerges out of a very specific location. The You'll see this sort of brown, very dark brown charger that sits on the table. That's made out of the soil from about 4 feet under the Stone Barns farm. We did soil tests and saw which soil had higher clay content. So we dug
okay,
down and grabbed some of that, mixed half and half with the black porcelain material that I make for a series of bowls called Chef's Bowls. So that's the charger. It's important because of what you just said, Nick, was like it sets the ground. It is the ground. It
hmm,
literally is the ground,
yeah, yeah,
but
Yeah.
it's also the metaphorical ground for a
yeah,
series
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
courses to be laid on. So it's both the physical and metaphorical ground. On that sits this little cream colored plate that is porcelain, but it's has expressions. They're actually like physical expressions, like fossils of wheat and rye and grass,
hmm,
the from the fields outside. Um, and then a cup, a little grass-fed bone china cup made from the bones from the kitchen. And that's the place setting, and it's animal, it's vegetable, and it's mineral. It's there, and it's really kind of setting the stage for why people go there, not for my pottery, but for the
yeah,
food,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it both hopefully sets that stage, and then has a conversation with the food. Um, One of the things that I don't like thinking about my work as is a palette or a canvas for the food,
yeah,
because that uh, palettes and or more maybe more specifically canvases are just kind of like facile. They just sit
yeah,
there,
yeah,
and people are there not caring about it. But I hope that there's more of an integration with
yeah,
the food and the objects.
But there is also this cool thing. It's a test of quality too, because I was reading about the differences between when you use not grass-fed cows and like bones, the leftovers, when they use different ones, the quality of the product is different. The color, how bright they are. So I think we have many ways, if we are connected with our bodies, to know how good the food is, but sometimes it's not immediately visible. I think your ceramics are, because you can tell, right? For what I read, is the product is different when you use different cows that are haven't been fed or taken care of in the same way that a cow that has been properly taken care of, and that's it. That, that's proof. I love that. So people, yeah, they go to eat the food, but the fact that the quality of the product is different is also should be is like inspiring and motivating to say, okay, this is food that is different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a study that I think you're citing that I did with a colleague of mine on material qualities of bone china,
Yeah, yeah,
depending on the source of the bone. So we
yeah.
studied three sample sets: industrially produced bone ash, grain-fed bone ash, and grass-fed bone ash. And the
Mm,
results were really extraordinary. So much so that you can, when you hold the object. Like you can look at a scanning electron microscopic image of the difference of the three, and there it's
Hmm.
evident. But you have to have a little bit of training on how to analyze
Yeah.
those images. But if you hold a cup, one of my
yeah,
cups out of this grass-fed bone china, and then you hold a similar object that's out of industrially raised bone china, you can feel it. And I like to think of it as like if you can taste how an animal is raised. It's
Hmm.
better, tastes better, but it also is better for you.
yeah,
You can see it, and importantly, with my work, you can also feel it. So one of the things that I struggle with is like uh, having people know my work through pictures, because tactility is
yeah. You
so
cannot
important.
tell.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, the cup itself is so light, it's so thinly made that it the weight of it almost disappears, and what you're feeling is the weight of the water that's in it. Um,
yeah.
Okay.
and it's unglazed, and it's very very. I polish it very smoothly, so
Okay.
it's almost like rubbing a river stone in your between your thumb and your finger. But
Mm.
how do you describe that in an image? It's very difficult.
That is amazing. I think yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is like, how did you come out? Because I know you used this traditional method from the 18th century of this famous British china maker, right? How
Hmm.
did you end up just deciding that that was the
Well,
technique
well,
you
that
were going to use?
well that was just Josiah Spode. So I'm sure people have Spode pottery in their cabinets,
Yeah,
or
it's
maybe
quite common, right, to make
it's very
bone
common.
china.
Yeah.
Is it common in the U.S. or just like British
There
or?
is a little bit of a history, but Spode in
Okay.
1899, he perfected, actually,
Okay.
Josiah Spode the second. So he perfected the recipe for bone china, although it had been
Hmm.
around for about 45 years before in another
Okay.
factory in Britain. But but it also tells a story of the coevolution of agriculture
Huh.
and industrial ceramics,
Hmm.
because for hundreds and hundreds of years, the British and many European manufacturers were trying to replicate Chinese porcelain:
Yeah.
white, hard, dense, impervious,
Hmm.
translucent, um, and they couldn't. And at some point, they were just sort of grinding up everything white and adding it to two ingredients that they knew. They were pretty sure
Yeah.
two ingredients they knew, but not the third. And at that same time, beef cattle was becoming more popular in Britain, and milk.
Hmm.
And so there were more bones to deal with. And those bones, clever industrialists like Josiah Spode
Hmm.
um, started grinding them up in the hopes to make a Chinese porcelain, and discovered a new material called bone china.
Hmm.
What's so interesting to me about bone china, so the reason I use Spode's recipe
Hmm.
is because he's the one who perfected it. And
Mhm.
I want the material to have it really has more in common with his material than it does with contemporary bone china, because cows back then weren't fed
Hmm.
grain,
Yeah.
weren't given chemicals
Hmm.
or hormones, etc. So the bone china that I produce from the kitchen at Blue Hill
Yeah.
materially has more in common with Spode's original bone
Okay.
china
Right.
than other stuff does. So um, and but it's another stop along this magic school bus of where ceramics and agriculture meet and cross,
Hmm.
right? Because the invention of bone china wouldn't have happened without the animal
Mm.
husbandry in Britain of greater wealth, greater meat eating, and more cows being raised.
Okay.
Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah.
Is Go ahead, Julie.
No, no. Go ahead.
All right. Um, where was I? Do bones of other? So it's mostly cattle, right? That is almost entirely cattle. Always cattle.
No,
No.
I
Okay.
mean, so a couple examples that aren't. In Finland, it's sometimes reindeer.
Okay.
And in my studio, I'm doing a lot of different animals. So
Okay.
Mm.
I've done most of the farm animals,
Right.
Meaning.
and sheep and chickens and goats and cows. Obviously, it's mostly cows. I mean, the work that I make and
Hmm.
produce for the restaurant is all cows,
Yeah.
Okay.
But pigs as well. Um, and but in so my co-investigator in the bone china studies, an evolutionary biologist. So he was de-accessioning some of the animals in his lab, some of the
Okay.
skeletons. So I was like, well,
All
let's put
right.
them to use. So we turned them into bone china. So I have some turtle bone china and
Okay.
some marmot bone
Oh.
china. These were all animals that had been dead for a
Yeah.
long
Right.
time ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
part of a scientific lab
Uh-huh.
display. Um, and with few exceptions, like a healthy bone is calcium and phosphorus.
Hmm. So it's
So
basically it doesn't matter. It's all the same material in the end for the most part, or
unless it's unhealthy,
right. Right.
so
Mm.
like the grain-fed animals showed a prevalence of a mineral called whitlockite, which is calcium and phosphorus bound to iron and manganese or
Okay.
magnesium. I'm sorry, I don't quite remember. Um, and because of that, those two elements actually reduce firing temperature,
Hmm.
tend to produce colors that are a little more yellow, so a little less white, and create a weaker structure. So the same elements deposited in bone that make the bone weaker
Hmm.
because of lack of exercise and poor diets, or manufactured diets is maybe more accurate, lead to lower quality bone china. Which is to say that grass-fed animals that walk around a lot and
Hmm.
exercise um, their muscles and have stronger bones lead to better, by historical definitions. Historical definitions of quality of bone china have to do with whiteness, translucency, and durability. All three of those categories are improved when the animal eats grass and walks around.
Wow.
Quality, durability, and
It's strength, so durability, hardness, translucency, how much you can see through
translucency.
it,
Yeah.
and whiteness.
Huh. So, okay. So, there are like ethical concerns and a bit of a confrontation for people. It's a discussion around vegetarianism or being an omnivore. What happens if you see the actual animal, if you eat the same or not, right? That's a question
Mm,
that it's around and addressed often in these discussions. You are actually doing that with your work because you work with the bones, you touch the bones, you just direct. Have you thought about that? How does that feel for you? What people tell you about it? Because it's
mm.
this same ethical, existential, physiological, emotional question, but with your work, through your work.
Yeah, I think about it all the time. So my father is a butcher, and I'd grow up and work sometimes in his slaughterhouse. And so I was around cows from very early on. And it was a whole cow plant. Like a cow would walk in
Hmm.
one end and cuts of meat would come out the other end. And so when I went to college, I became a vegetarian and spent 20 years as a vegetarian, right? As you do, you leave the
The
house
son
and
of a
you do the
butcher.
opposite,
Yeah.
right? Um, but that was in the 90s when I don't think there was the availability or at least the understanding of the environmental impact
Yeah.
of the meat industry, the way it was being run. And I think the choices were fewer for more humanely raised beef. You guys probably know more about this than I do. But at least through my experience, I feel like over the past 25 years, I've gained greater knowledge of the connection between our impact on the environment and meat eating, meat growing, meat raising, and also quality, importantly. And so when I decided to eat meat again, was not surprisingly concurrent with the beginning of this project with Dan. I could see it through that lens, having grown up first 20 years of my life as the son of a butcher, next 20 years of my life as a vegetarian. And now I think I have that perspective where I don't think it's not a mistake that you can use my bone china cups and see the cows walking around the farm at the same time,
Yeah.
right? And it's not something to hide, I don't think. It's something to illuminate. And if it's done well, I think there's a lot of pride in that.
Yeah. Talking about transparency. Yeah. Or
Yeah,
translucency.
I would also say, I think just, Juliana, something you said just reminded me that most people, when they interact with it, they kind of have this aha moment, like, oh, I didn't know, they'd heard of bone china, but they didn't know it was made out of bones.
Yeah.
And I love that reaction.
Yeah.
There's that connection to how we raise food once again. Yeah.
I'm just curious, do diners at Blue Hill ever complain? Just thinking some very progressive diners that are, hardcore vegans. I assume Dan has a vegan menu. Is that, or a vegetarian option or menu?
Yeah, I think they can accommodate
Okay.
everything. There's really no menu though.
I guess so. But yeah, but I'm sure there's people that come in and say they don't eat meat or whatever, they're vegetarian or vegan. And I'm curious if they ever complain about the bone china.
I haven't heard any.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious. Like, it just came to me. Like, I wonder how that would impact their.
Well, I'm guessing if
thinking,
it's a vegetarian menu or vegan, they don't use the bone china, right?
I think if somebody would express that they were vegan and wouldn't like wear leather or sit on leather, then this would be akin to it. It's the material culture component of veganism.
Yeah.
And yes, it's made out of what was at one point animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's some discussion. Maybe this might be a little too nerdy, but like if you look under a microscope, you can tell that the material, when calcium is bound to phosphorus in a bone, it's called hydroxyl apatite. And you can always tell that it was once bone, even if it's been pulverized and then fired. And like, if you have the right equipment to look at it, it always expresses some of its animal quality.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're using clay or whatever similar material, you're already eating animals, right? Somehow they have to be almost everywhere, or at least not plant-based. It's not a 100 plant-based
Or
ceramic.
rock-based.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
It's just that here is evident.
Right. Yeah, I never thought of that. But I mean, if you go back far enough, a lot of limestones were once shells of animals, right?
Yeah.
That might be a little too far.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, another research.
No, I don't know. But
one
it's
of
just
your
like
colleagues.
But when people start putting these like absolutes into their thinking of things, it's really hard. It's like, how far are you going to take it? And I was wondering if. that ever happens.
Right.
I'm sure it has. I'm sure there's some story at Blue Hill, but
Well,
I'm
yeah, I
curious
mean,
about, yeah.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Sorry, Greg.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Juliana.
No, I'm curious about the artistic part of it. How do you decide which design you are going to use? I mean, this is I don't know. It's kind of a silly question because it's like asking an artist, how do you decide what you are going to paint or
Mm,
make? But
mm,
because you have that clarity in terms of what it means, what the product is coming from, you have a picture of the animal, and in this case your collaboration with Dan Barber or another chef that has a concept in the restaurant. I'm guessing you have all that in mind. So how is that creative process?
hmm. Yeah. So in my studio, I always start with idea, and the concept drives the outcome. And so, back to this kind of notion that if flavor is to food, what aesthetics is to art,
Yeah.
I'm not so sure flavor. One of the things that I like about Dan's approach is that it's very conceptual. That the idea, and in many cases, I would say maybe most cases, the idea is like better health,
Mhm.
better soil health, people health, animal health, plant health, drives the idea for the food that emerges. And for me, it's the concept that drives the idea for the pieces that I make. So just to kind of take a step back, um, our relationship, I think, uh, is very productive because it is collaborative in the true sense of that word,
Mhm.
where there's a dialogue that is multi-directional. So in a traditional chef pottery relationship, there's often a kind of a one-directional
Yeah.
commission-based approach. Like I
Mm.
need a plate
Mhm.
that's 9 inches, that's white with a rim so
Yeah.
that the peas don't fall off. But for us, we really go back and forth. So I'll spend time in the studio um, thinking of ideas that emerge from spending time in the kitchen with him and eating the food that he makes, or walking around the farm, and come up with new ideas to bring to him to use and to play with, and to see if he can activate. Right, his food really activates these objects, and then there'll be a back and forth. Well, he might have an idea to serve a particular beet that he's growing or raising, or a type of
Hmm.
wheat that he raises, and challenge me to make a vessel that connects with it intellectually and also serves functionally. Right, it has to go through a dishwasher,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
and the wait staff has to be
Yeah.
able to carry it. Like
Yeah.
some of my work is really heavy,
Yeah.
and it just has to be like not so heavy where you can't
Yeah.
carry it. So there are some of those concerns that have a little bit more to do with design than they do with art, right?
Hmm.
Practicality
Yeah.
and design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea for the work really emerges from this collaborative back and forth dialogue that we have. And when it's really firing is when we're just kind of like coming up with ideas and challenging each other. So a good example, I think, would be what I had mentioned before, this decade-long process that I've been doing where when I go to the farm, I take a mold of the surface of a part of the farm
Okay.
and then bring it back to the studio and use that mold to press plates into, or
Okay.
objects into. And so it records a moment in time, a season, and very much a location, which just happens to be, not just happens to be, is critically right outside the dining room where people are eating. And then those return back to the kitchen as kind of a, how can they be employed? How can you use them to get the most meaning out of them? And they also have to look good, right?
Hmm.
Art generally works better if it looks good. Not always, but like you can engage with an audience if there's an aesthetic that's intriguing.
Hmm.
And that engagement wants them to lean in, not step back from the thing. Um, and and then that's so I just finished this series of plates that is a cast from each season. So there are 4 casts. And you
Hmm.
can really see that, like in the fall, there are a couple vegetables that are rotting in the ground. There's like a bit of an eggplant sticking up from the
Hmm.
cast. It's really beautiful. And in the spring, there's some decaying leaves. In the summer, it's more freshly tilled. And the winter has
Hmm.
these deep cracks from the frost, or the freeze thaw cycle. And we just photographed these. On each of the casts is a pickled vegetable that represents that season. So grown in that season, pickled for storage.
Hmm.
And so there again, it's the relationship between the surface of the farm where this everything happens, and the result of what's grown on the farm being served, brought back to the surface of the farm as a plate. I don't know if that really answers that
No, no,
question,
No,
Juliana.
no.
no, it does. Yeah, yeah, of
So
course.
in sorry, just comprehending that sequence. So are those each of those plates used at different periods of the year, or are they all used like in the same menu?
Yeah, good question. I don't, they're so new that I'm not
Okay.
sure I know how to
Yeah.
answer that.
Yeah.
There's maybe I could answer, there's another series of objects that I've made that is the animal analog to this vegetable
Uh-huh.
process, where I, um, for a long time, the information book, not quite a menu, but the book you're
Mhm.
given when you sit down, is based off of it's called pecking, grazing, rooting. I might not
Yeah.
have the order correct,
Hmm.
but those
I
three
think that's
three
right.
ways
Yeah.
that, yeah, that animals transform crops, something that we
Hmm.
can't eat, like acorns and grass,
Hmm.
into something we can eat, their bodies. Um, so I fed sheep and chickens and pigs, and what am I missing? Oh, those amazing Toulouse geese. So Berkshire pigs, Toulouse geese, and I don't know what kind of sheep they were. Um, so I prepared in my studio rounds of clay, discs of
Hmm.
clay. One of them I grew grass in for the sheep. Another, when I got up to the farm, I put some acorns and scraps from the kitchen in for the pigs. And the third, more acorns for the geese and some of what the geese were eating, and fed them so that the sheep would nibble on the grass. The pigs just totally destroyed the plate, the first one. The second one, we got out of the pig pen before they could destroy it. And then the goose one, the pecking one, was really beautiful. They were a little timid. They'd stood on the plate and picked,
Yeah.
but it recorded that activity in wet clay, very
Okay.
much like a T-Rex stepping in wet mud and we
Right.
find the
Right. Right.
fossil. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then took those back to the studio, made molds of them, and then cast them in plates. So the plates are called pecking,
Yeah.
grazing, rooting,
Okay.
and they actually show that activity in
Yeah.
physical form. And then they get returned to the table to like in the pig one, for example. I mean, they get used to serve lots of different things, but
Uh-huh.
um, it served at one point a tart made out of ingredients that a pig forages for, right? So it's
Yeah.
really this kind of full circle, and that's where, like at that plate, that's where I want that story
Yeah.
to be told. Yeah.
How much do I'm just curious, like how much do the waiters explain of your
Yeah,
ceramics like at the
yeah,
table? Because what one issue I have at a lot of fine dining restaurants is sometimes there's too much information given, and it's
Yeah.
like you just become overwhelmed with where
yeah,
everything's from, and like you're sitting there for 5 minutes and the food's getting cold and all that. Like how much? Because I mean, the information you're given about the farm is already a lot of just what the cow's been eating to get that butter and the whatever. There's a lot of information there. How much are the diners aware of the plate?
Yeah. I don't know how to answer that. I
Okay.
think I think as much as they want to know.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
Honestly, I think that's the best approach.
uh-huh.
But go on. Yeah.
No, no, I
Yeah.
agree. I
Okay.
mean, I think if they
Yeah.
show interest,
Yeah.
the wait staff is amazing there.
Yeah.
They know and they
Yeah.
can share the information. But as I said earlier, people are there to eat, not
Yeah.
to look at plates, right? Although maybe a little bit. if I'm doing it right.
Yeah.
The thing that people ask most about is the bone china,
Yeah.
because for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons it's executed as a water glass is that it really represents the entire project
Yeah.
conceptually. It has it all in that little white water glass. Um, and importantly, the water glass is the one thing I make that stays with the diner the entire meal, right? It never gets swept away and back to the kitchen. And if you think about it, if you're like me, you drink a lot of water when you eat. You're picking it up and putting it down. You're touching it. It's touching your lips. There's a relationship with the water glass that none of the other pieces I make, or dishes just in
Hmm.
general, have. It's very intimate. And so I wanted that. I wanted the bone china story to be told in the object that's the most intimately connected to the diner. And because of that, I think most people ask, when they ask about the work, they ask about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think that's the best approach. Like when the information is forced on you is when it becomes overwhelming, I think. But sometimes just a snippet of information and then the diners becomes curious is the best way. And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure Blue Hill has a good approach to this.
Yes, they do. And the
Yeah,
aesthetics there is it's just so beautiful.
yeah,
It's
Mm.
warm, the materials are warm. It's just a very beautiful place to just physically be in.
yeah.
And so that also marries with my approach to making work. I don't use glaze very often, and if
Okay.
I do, it's because the glaze has a meaning to it. The materials are typically brown or black or white or like rusty red.
Uh-huh.
I don't use bright colors. Um, the idea isn't for the work to say like, "Hey, look at me, look at me, look at me." It's to have this both conceptual, yes, but also aesthetic relationship with the food. And one of the things that I found I have in common with my approach in the studio to Dan's approach in the kitchen is that it's subtle. That it takes a lot of technique to
Hmm.
make something look simple. And I think we both do that. That
Hmm.
that we're not trying to show off techniques just because we know them.
Yeah.
It's about the result, and oftentimes you can understand what you're looking at or what you're eating more clearly if it's simpler.
Hmm.
But it
Yeah.
takes a
Yeah.
lot to make
Yeah.
something
No,
simple.
it's hard. It's harder to make something simple, of
Hmm.
course.
Yeah. Well, that connects with something I was thinking, and that this is the last thing I would like to ask you. I think we're running out of time, but uh, it's everything. Everything is so foundational. Like you were saying, making something simple is hard because I think it requires to really get to the origin. Your work is very historical. It's literally historical because it's geological. So everything is foundational about it. Like the geological aspect of it, the aesthetics, but also nutritional wise, and I was thinking it's sustenance in all these ways, but it's also what is holding the food.
Mm.
That's it cannot be more foundational than that.
Mm.
And I think that all is the same foundation seen through a different category or a different, reading. But it's
Yeah.
historical. It's like it connects us with the origin and in time with, you know, I mean, you know about it. I don't because I don't have background
Well,
in geosciences, but
that
yeah,
reminds me of my friend Kate Thomas, who's a writer, said about the work. Um, let's Everybody knows you are what you eat, right?
yeah.
And she said, but you're also what you eat off of. When she
Yeah.
was writing about my work, and I thought that was just really beautiful. I it does I often look to history as precedent and like to think and talk about it through the work as a whole, right? So this body of work, this collaboration with Dan is about 10 years and ongoing. Um, and maybe it's because I teach ceramics and part of my job is to teach the history of ceramics as well. But categorically, the work really makes its way throughout ceramic history from earthenware, which is the first type of clay, which is the farm casts. That's the category of work that I cast the farm. They're made in earthenware because they're meant to be as close to the earth as possible. There it is in the word earthen. To stoneware, there's a piece where I took a field stone from the farm and brought it back to the studio and fired it and then pulverized it and then milled it to a very fine liquid, sprayed it on stoneware, and then fired it. So it became a single stone glaze. And it maybe that one stone glazed about 100 plates and then was gone. And it was an idea that emerged from eating Dan's butter, the single udder butter, butter made from a single cow. So it was like the material analog to this bovine approach to ingredient purity and or maybe not purity is not a good word, but like the locality of an ingredient. And so anyway, there's stoneware, and then if we think like in terms of ceramic technology, ultimately we get to porcelain. Of course, a lot of the work I make is porcelain, and then a subcategory, at least for ceramic historians, of porcelain is bone china. And for me, the bone china really is very exciting because it's about history, as you said, Juliana. It's about 230 years old as a material. I'm sorry, yeah, 1799, 230 years old as a material. But I also think because it's the only material that it's the only ceramic material that has something that was once alive as part of its body, as part of its materiality, that for me, this grass-fed bone china project feels like it's more about the future than it is about the history of ceramics. Like, because you can look at a material under a microscope and understand something about the way we live on the earth, there's something very forward and almost like hopeful about that, I think, in my work. Whereas a lot of the other materials in earthenware and stoneware and other porcelains, they're all geologically derived. And so they connect to a cultural history. And in bone china, it's both a cultural history, but it's also an agricultural history that I think is being expressed.
Yeah. Yeah, how to go about that in the future, right?
Yeah, where does this lead, right?
Yeah.
I have a small studio. It's not like I can scale up to something that is industrial, and I don't think I'd want to, because what happens when you scale up? Those are the challenges that I think the media industry has had to deal with, and sometimes not so well.
It's super fascinating.
Yes,
I have like
really
1,000 questions I wanted to ask you, but one is, have you ever had like edible clay?
Well, that's like Pepto-Bismol, I think. I think the
Oh, is
clay
Pepto is okay.
I'm pretty sure there's clay it settles your stomach. I know there are cultures that have eaten chunks of
Yeah,
clay.
that's where I was getting at. Like in Peru and like the Altiplano in Bolivia too. There's like there's clays because the minerals in the clay they nerve. Like you usually serve them with like potatoes with all these like kind of bitter toxins in them, and it kind of neutralizes them.
Mm.
I don't
Oh,
know.
we'd be really interested in because the potatoes. Um, this is also not really
It's
out
all
there
right.
yet
Yeah.
because it's so new. But
Okay.
if I can, one of the more recent projects that I'm working on is what I call root vegetable geodes.
Okay.
So I take sunchokes and parsnips and celeriac from the farm, mix some clay in with farm soil and coat them, and then we bake them. And I know this is a very common technique of clay
Yep.
encrusted vegetables baked.
Yeah.
But then when they come out of the oven, I very carefully crack them in half like a geode, take out the now cooked vegetable, and then that becomes an ingredient. Then I take those halves back to the studio and fire them to become
Okay.
bowls to serve that
All
food
right.
back in.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
really cool.
this is a weird question, but I'm assuming you're not there every night to encrust But is it being cooked like that as well? Like to serve? No.
Well, that's very much an
Okay.
experimental phase.
All right.
But I think that this is a good example of that
Yeah.
kind of reciprocity in ideas and thinking,
Uh-huh.
because it's like a sculpting technique or is it a
Hmm.
cooking technique? Well, it's kind of
Yeah.
both, and it's not new. I haven't invented that technique.
Yeah.
People have been cooking that way for eons. Well, maybe not eons, but for some time. And but what I think is new is then turning those into vessels and
Hmm.
bringing them
Yeah.
back to the
Okay.
table. So how those get used and how those take shape, still very much in progress.
Okay.
But for
Mm.
That's
me, it's
cool.
really exciting because it's kind of this convergent evolution
Uh-huh.
of materials and ingredients. Like, what's a
Yeah.
material? What's an ingredient?
Yeah,
Hmm.
You
yeah,
know? Yeah. And that's
and
Yeah.
when you said edible clay, that got me
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's just I can imagine somebody in the kitchen sculpting every night. Sculpting. They have to learn this technique of sculpting to bake the ingredient somehow.
Oh,
I
I
don't
love
know.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, please. I'm not definitely not up there every night.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
like
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
every other month or so I travel up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to find a picture, and I don't remember if it was in your webpage or the Instagram. Is that the carrot with the green plate, what you were describing, or that's a different thing?
There's a carrot.
Yeah, you were talking about roots. I don't know if it's a carrot. I'll look
Actually,
it up and ask you
yeah.
because now I'm curious if what I see is
Oh,
if what I saw is what you just described.
actually,
My,
the landing page of my website, it's like a
I
carousel of images. There, the root
Yeah, I think
vegetables
it's
works in
there.
progress
Oh,
are there.
okay.
Yeah,
So it is.
yeah,
It is. Okay.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
like a little teaser.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I have to.
Oh,
Okay.
oh, it looks like a carrot, but it's a parsnip.
It's a part. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
process you were describing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's that
Okay.
piece. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Still very much a work in progress, but it's like the next thing is always the most exciting thing, right? And this is the next thing.
Yeah.
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 What is material and what is food? It's, yeah,
All right.
interesting.
Super cool. Yeah, we could have you here all day, man. Like,
Well, maybe we could do it again.
yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely.
Yes.
But sincere thank you for talking with us.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
it's
you
been a
so
real
much.
pleasure. Like
And
these are the most
Well,
fun
congratulations.
conversations.
well, thank
Yeah.
you for
Yeah.
having me. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you.
Thank you.